Hello, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for doing the early shift with me on this fine Sunday morning. My name's Sam McManus. I'm the founder of YellowWood Adventures. We're an adventure travel company. We go to off-the-beaten-track destinations, often to remote locations, and today I'll be taking you through Mongolia, which is actually one of my all-time favorite countries. Now, please do, there's a Q&A at the end, but if you do have any questions just while I'm talking, please do just raise your hand and ask. We've got plenty of time this morning. So we're looking at Mongolia here, as you can see, based above China. It's one of the last great frontiers of our planet. That's why I absolutely love it. It's got a population of 3.5 million people in a landmass, approximately the size of a good chunk of Western Europe. 3 million of those people live in the capital, Ulaanbaatar, which means Red Warrior from their communist days under the USSR. So, in all of this other space, you've just got 500,000 people living, and they were, communist under the Russians, but for thousands and thousands of years have been nomadic, continued to be nomadic under the communist regime, and when that fell apart, was the sort of quickest of the countries to just revert back to their traditional pastoralist ways. You get geologically, you get three sort of main rough sections. Large swathes of forests in the north, the long steppe of grasslands in the middle band, and then the dry, barren Gobi Desert in the south, with the Altai and Khangai mountain ranges. You cannot talk about Mongolia. I like to talk about the history and put a country into context without mentioning this gentleman. This man is Genghis Khan. He was the ruler of the Mongols in the 13th century and just kind of changed the world as we know it, really. He founded his empire from Karakorum. You can see the Orkhon River here. He finally defeated the last great other Mongol tribe called the Naimans. He first unified the Mongols for the first time as a country, and then, as you will know from your history, spread all across the great swathe of Central Asia, hacking out an empire from bloodthirsty battle tactics. They got all the way to the Danube in Germany, and it was later his son, Kublai Khan, moved the capital down to Peking, which is modern Beijing in China today. And it kind of it changed the world as we know it. Everyone knew the Mongols were good at killing people. They had their famous warrior tactic where they could ride horses but turn around in the saddle and fire their bows during a retreat. They decimated all armies in front of them. They would ransack entire villages and towns and murder everyone to inspire fear in enemies, so a lot of the people just surrendered on sight. But what no one really saw coming from the Mongols was their gift for administration after they had conquered all of these lands. And it was them that brokered the Silk Roads, and it was most people were dead, to be fair, but for the first time, there was a channel that traders could pass from China all the way to Europe, and of course, along that Silk Road, one of the main commodities was silk. But other than that, information, mixing of cultures, mixing of peoples, and this was all inspired by the Mongols. So they changed history as we know it. And he's still today a national hero in Mongolia, as you would imagine. Beers are named after him, children are named after him, restaurants, everything. You can't escape the guy. Where Karakorum used to be, it was a very multicultural city, and even though it was way far up in the north east of the Silk Roads, very multicultural. People would come from Europe even and all over Central Asia. Now there's nothing left except for a 16th century monastery built there called Erdenzhou Monastery, and this is the picture of the monastery there. You still have monks, and Tibetan Buddhism is very popular in Mongolia. Unfortunately, the communists under the USSR decimated most of the cultural sites. because they, did not inspire communist thinking. But there are still a few in Ulaanbaatar and a few set places in the countryside. There are a few places left, and they have the beautiful prayer wheels here. So trust me, I'm getting to horse riding, but I want to set the scene because to understand why horse riding is such a special part of Mongolian life, you actually have to understand who the Mongolians are and why they're nomads. So nomadic peoples means people who move around. They have no set place. They may have winter or autumn and summer camps, but they move and they live in gers, which are the felt tents of the local people. But why do they do that? Is this some strange cultural eccentricity? No, it's not at all. It's they have to do it to survive. They're pastoralists. The climate of Mongolia and much of Central Asia is very unforgiving. Freezing cold winters, boiling hot summers, and they live and die by their flocks. They have to move their flocks around to get fresh pasture. In the summer, the plains may be too hot. You have to move them up high to the mountains to get fresh grass. When the snows come down, your flocks will die if you leave them there. You have to move them down to the plains. And so they're constantly moving just to keep their animals alive. They have sheep, goats, camels, yaks, and horses, of course. And, the Mongolian diet, they're not farmers. They don't have crops. They live on pretty much meat and the milk from their animals. And how do you herd animals? Well, you have to herd animals by being on a horse. So Mongols, Mongolians, and many, we do trips in Kyrgyzstan as well. They are born horsemen. They're on a horse from such a young age. They can ride a horse before they can walk. Slight deviation of a story, but I remember being in Bishkek, which is the capital of Kyrgyzstan, and the nomadic peoples have a huge amount in common. In Kyrgyzstan, they're called yurts instead of gers. It comes from the Russian word yurta, but they're exactly the same, except the Mongolians have 2 poles and the Kyrgyz have 1 pole in their yurt. And I was chatting to a young student who was Kyrgyz and had very good English, and he said he grew up in the city, so he was late to discover horse riding, and he was only sort of a later age teenager when he was about 17. His mum finally took him to the countryside and he got on a horse. And I'll never forget the way he described it. He said, I sat on the horse and I just understood the levers. It was like something that I was just born to do. And he sat on the horse and he just knew how it was. It's in his blood. Like the Mongolians, when you see them ride, it is in their blood. And I've got some pictures of this later on. So just going back, in the morning, I'll show you pictures of the homestays where we go and stay with the local people. The women will always go out and milk the yaks and the animals to make all sorts of dairy products, from butter, cheese, yogurt. They even distill the milk from mare's milk to Mongolian vodka. It tastes like kind of a strong sake in Japan. It's actually really, really good and definitely does the job, by the way. So here you are. Here's some gers with a faithful sleeping Bankar guard dog here. You can dismantle one of these down in about an hour, and they transport them. In the old days, mainly on yaks. Now, if they can afford a truck, a family always use a truck. But we see them using yaks to transport them all of the time. And inside, they're really homely. Again, this Tibetan Buddhism reigns to this day. A lot of the colors have religious meaning. They're nearly always orange inside, very ornately, brightly painted, and they're extremely warm. Solar panels have spread to Mongolia, and so often, they will have electricity, lights, and powered by solar power now. And the family will all sleep in the same ger normally. If there's guests, they'll sleep in another one. I mean, it just depends. Where we go, we'll bring groups of up to 12 riders, so they have guest gers, if you like, where our clients can go and sleep. Very, very much a sense of community. All of the family live together, 3 or 4 even generations. There's always kids running around and playing in Mongolia, and it's just a very open society. You never knock when you go into a ger, which I've always found really, really interesting. You just open the door and you're instantly welcome. You have to know the people as well first, of course. you also have to call hold the dog, because if they don't know you and one of these Bangkar dogs come for you, trust me, it's no laughing matter. They're about the size of a small bear. They're actually quite terrifying. I love this guy, the antisocial social club. Aren't Mongolians lovely and friendly? Look at that guy, isn't he great? He breeds horses to race. Mongolians race at the Nadam festival, which takes place in midsummer. It's very popular, and they race with children riders because they're much lighter, just so the horses can go faster. You'd think they'd be worried about the kids, but they're not at all. This is Baska. She's one of the local guides we use. And she's, as the gentleman before, she's wearing what's called a deal. And if you go into Mongolians and house, or Ger, I should say, and they're wearing Western clothing, they always look actually quite scruffy because they're a bit dirty, and it's like got something written in English on it or something. You know, they're just second-hand clothes. And it always looks a bit scruffy. But as soon as they put on their traditional deal, they just seem to change, and you can sort of see that timeless, noble characteristic, if you like, of the Mongol people. And they're extremely practical. A deal will come down to right above the thick leather Mongol boots that they wear. And this is amazing for horse riding, because me as a Westerner, you know, I went riding in chaps and some jeans, and, you know, I've got a good coat and a hat and all of that, and I've been riding there in winter, and my legs got freezing cold because of the wind from the steppe. But the deal comes right down and covers that leg area, so they're far more practical than what we have. This is a beautiful example of a deal there. So just some pictures of the local people. This is the Naiman region, which we're about to look at, and you can see here the flocks are never far from the yurts. They're always there, and it's very clever to keep their animals safe from the chun, or the wolf, at night. They just take the babies, and they'll tie up a baby close to their gers, and the herd will instinctively come and circle around to protect that young calf. And so, you know, just by moving the smaller animals, they can move the entire herd. And it's really, really fun to go out at sunset and throw stones and try and get all the animals to come back to the yurts. That's good fun. Oh yeah, here's a great example of transportation by yak. They can move. They can really move when they want to. They look sort of big and slow, but if one of those starts running, you know, even if it's carrying several hundred kilograms, they are unbelievably powerful animals. And even the Mongolians, who, you know, for thousands of years have been using these animals to transport their families and their homes and their livelihoods, things go wrong all the time. Same with horses. You know, they're still animals. They get spooked, or they just wander off, or they get hungry. So there's never really a dull moment of transporting these around. So yeah, this isn't a sales pitch, of course, but to give you an idea, you know, the reason I started going to Mongolia was to do holidays there. This is the horse riding trip we do. We go from Ulaanbaatar to Kustai National Park to see the taki, which is the last original wild horses. They had to be reintroduced into Mongolia because they were wiped out. They look very much like zebras, but without the stripes. They're just sort of a russet colored. And then we go up to the monastery we saw, and then we spend 5 days in the Naiman region, which means the 8 lakes. This is the picture from the first time I went by myself to go and scope out. I just had a Mongolian guide called Batar. He spoke 2 words of English. One is okay, and the other one was yak. That didn't actually stop us getting on swimmingly for 5 days together. I brought my violin, which you can see he's carrying there, to mix receptions from the people I played to. I remember his wife sort of insinuating to me that I should leave the violin there because it made such a horrendous racket. She could use it in the evening to get the yaks in to come to the gers, which is, I can't tell if it's my greatest or worst compliment. And so I went on this first trip, I went a little bit late, and this was about late September time. So it was October, and the snows were already starting to come down. You can see it's looking pretty frosty behind there. So we tend to take clients a bit earlier, towards the end of summer. But actually, this was also a great time because there was one beautiful day where the snow just started chucking it down, and we were riding the horses through the forest, through the snow, and I was like, it's just wild, you're back in nature. There's something about being on a horse for a long period of time. Your phone doesn't work because it ran out of battery, and you're just back in the wilderness. It's a beautiful, natural way of life, and things just sort of start to wake up and click inside you that you'd sort of forgotten, and things that certainly by being surrounded by modernization and being in a city that you sort of tend to forget. So it's a quiet life, but it's one full of joy, and it's just such a great privilege to just be in some vast, untouched nature. That's myself on a Bactrian camel in the Gobi Desert. Again, it was coming into winter, so you can see snow on sands there, and these great big woolly things. I felt like I was Luke Skywalker in Star Wars. It's really cool. Right, finally to horse riding. So the Mongolian horse, they're quite short, as you can see. They're stocky, but they're very fast. They're very hardy animals. I mean, they survive the Mongolian winter, which is brutal. And they just do it by being very hardy and very tough and obviously sticking together in the herds. It's funny, in the West, so I ride a lot in Kyrgyzstan, in Mongolia. I've ridden a lot in the Middle East, the Arab horses as well. We tend to really pamper our horses in the West. I've noticed, I've been riding here a few times, people worry about them and, I don't know, put coats over them in winter, which doesn't actually help them. It makes them weaker. Horses are made to be outside, and we sort of, always feeding them tidbits and worrying about them, and they sort of just become a bit sort of high-maintenance girlfriends, you know what I mean? They're always like, oh, there's always something wrong with a Western horse. Here, they're just horses. Like, they go out and they'll grab them from the herd, and you sit on one and you just get on with it. So I've really noticed in Central Asia, when we take tourists, we've taken first-time riders, and they just sit on the horse, and the horse is like, meh, business as usual, and off you go. You rarely, touch wood, you rarely have problems with them. They get skittish, yeah, of course, they're animals. You have to be careful. There are things like, never take your jacket off when you're sitting on a horse, because they'll see the shadow and they'll think it's some sort of predator. I saw a lady do that. She had a scarf on and she took it off, and the scarf cast a shadow over the horse, and the horse went absolutely ballistic. So it still happens, but there are a few sort of rules you learn. Don't kick the horse and say yeehaw. That's one of them. But they're really, really, really fun to ride. You have to, their canter can be a little bit, because they've got shorter legs, it's almost like a syncopated rhythm. You have to tune into that a little bit. But then once you get them into a canter, it's plain sailing. And once you get into a gallop, well, you're just holding on for dear life, really. I'm actually wearing the same top. I should probably buy some new clothes. But yeah, I mean, look. Where do you get the opportunity to do this? You've just got space. You've just got land. You can just get on a horse, and you can see there's a few gers in the background there, and you can just gallop around and have fun. They're very, very hardy. The horses they'll just walk all day, as long as you keep them watered. Obviously they'll eat at night. There's fresh grass everywhere. Here's me trying my absolute best to try and race these guys. They're more focused on waving to the camera. The only reason he's behind me, I think he was just doing it out of kindness, so I didn't fall off. They are so fast, the Mongol riders. This man's especially quite fat. He loves drinking vodka. But when he's off the horse, he was sort of quite bow-legged and sort of heavy-set guy, and would waddle along. When he was on a horse, I don't know, have you seen the Disney film Mulan about Chinese warriors? There's a scene where, they're trying to be warriors and they're all crap, and then it goes through a montage, and by the end of it, they're amazing warriors, and there's a fat character in that, and he can do somersaults and cartwheels over bits of wood on the ground like a ballerina. It's unbelievably dexterous. And when he got on a horse, he was like that. He would just sort of sway from side to side as the horse was bolting down this patch of steppe, and to them it's just it's absolute second nature. There's some nice pictures there. Yeah, they were all just laughing at me afterwards. So taking the tourists out, as I said, we do provide hard hats and suitable for first-time riders, but it's just absolutely wonderful to get out and to see this kind of untouched nature, really. In the evenings, we'll take the horses just down away from the yurts, peg out just to get a small wooden peg with rope, and then just bang that down with a rock. Doesn't have to be far, and then they'll just graze in the evening. Obviously, we water them in the evenings from the lakes and first thing in the morning as well. And then we get to stay with the local families. This is such a cute kid. He had a cold at the time, so I gave him my hat. But like I said, there's always kids playing around, and the locals are just really, really friendly. This chap's another great famous vodka drinker. He brews it himself. I do remember there was one fun evening. I mean, the language barrier, after a few drinks, just no one really cares at all. We were just making jokes, even though we didn't really understand what we were saying. But then we ran out of this Mongolian vodka that he had made. But his wife kept it in the other ger, but they were all too scared to go and ask her because she didn't approve of him drinking so much. So they'd make me go, and I'd have to be like shamefully, please ask for some more. And then that ran out. So me and this gentleman, and it was quite dark, it was nighttime by that time, we got onto a motorbike and just drove round the lake to go to the other gers to ask them if they had any. And it was quite a surreal experience because it's nighttime and he'd just walk up and just open the door of a ger and just go in. And the family were, obviously they'd heard the motorbike coming, so they knew someone was there. They were just completely unperturbed. And I think we had to go to about 3 different households before we actually found some and gave them some money and took it back with us. But it was such a great little privileged insight I then had to just go and see these families. And it was like grandparents with the grandchildren sleeping across the way, and one was a young couple. And all the girls, they're inside, they were so homely and they were so warm because they had their stove, wood stove burning. And I was like, wow, it's a nice little life you guys have got here. It was really cool. Super cute little baby there with chubby cheeks. So yeah, horse riding through the Naiman Nur region. It's just one of my most fun things to do. We have 2 departures a year for this trip. We cap them at 12 clients, but we obviously will open more if a group fills up. Does anyone have any particular questions about the actual riding itself? Yes. For a day, never more than about 4 hours. And that's because it takes a while to get the horses ready. Also, it takes a while to actually pack up everyone's stuff, and you have to remember, because we're moving, we have to transport all of our luggage as well. There's no road through here. So we have pack horses as well as the riding horses. Everyone's stuff has to be put into their own bag. The bags are then put into saddlebags, and it takes a long time to make sure they're weighed up. You throw them over the side of the horse and tie them over the pack horses there. Or sometimes we use yaks. If we've got a big group, we'll need to bring food with us and a stove. We can't just rely on the local people to cook for, 12, with guides, up to 15 or 16 people, so we have to bring supplies. So it takes time to move from one place to another. Also, you don't want to be sitting in a saddle for more than 4 or 5 hours. A lady I've been here, this is my 4th day here at the show, and one lady asked me, the saddle's really, really uncomfortable. And I think this is sort of a myth that has arisen. There is one particular uncomfortable saddle, but that's used for racing specifically, and it's made so the rider can't sit down on it. Mongol saddles are just really functional, somewhere between a British and the American Western saddle. They just work. You can sit. You get stiff, obviously, from horse riding, but not because of the saddle. They're just leather, comfortable. Any other questions? Well, we'll come back at the end. You may have something you wish to ask there. So Well, some of these photos, by the way, were taken by a photographer that we took on one of the trip, which is why you'll see a lot of the same people in it, just because I took a photographer specifically, because client photos, trying to, again, take a shoot from the hip or take a photo from the saddle is actually quite dangerous. Again, it can spook the horse. You're then also off balance, so we discourage clients from taking photos. So we weren't getting loads of client photos, so I took a photographer with us. And she captured this, which was just there aren't any wild horses apart from the Taki. This is a herd, obviously they're owned, but unless they're riding them, they'll just let them run wild. And they just came and we took our horses to one side and they just all ran past us. And it's just, they look so happy, these animals. Because when they're not being ridden, they're just out grazing in the herd interaction as they should be. And, it's just a pleasure to see that. It's also really, really fun to just go past and travel through a landscape for 5 days and explore it and meet the new people there. When we stop and rest, we'll just have like a simple lunch, and we'll have, our main meal will be for breakfast or in the evening. Obviously, watering them along the way. Oh, this is one place that we stop off. This is the Orkhon waterfall. When I mentioned Chinggis Khan defeated the other Mongol tribe, the Naimans, this was on the Orkhon Valley around this river. So we know Chinggis Khan, or Genghis Khan as we call him in the West, we know he's been there and he'd seen this waterfall. Here's just some nice pictures of horses. And then we finally came through the park. Oh, this is the photographer, Uzge. She took most of these pictures. Oh, this is one of the Banka dogs. There's something really, really nice about riding a horse and having a dog trotting alongside you. They're fantastic guard dogs. They can act as natural herding dogs for the flocks as well of the local people. And then on the last night, we come and stay with this family, and in their Ger camp. They're actually the porters who have come with us the whole way, and this is the matriarch of the family. I'll just go back because there's the first time I came through here doing the recce for the trip, because it's not that visited, this region, by tourists. They get a few, not many actually coming through, because it is a national park, the area is protected, that's why there's no road going through. They get a few tourists, but not so many doing a long trip such as this. So the first time I came through here, I met the family when I was by myself with Batar, and I had a solar charger, which I'd use to charge up my mobile phone or my camera. And I just thought I'd lost it. So when I got back to Ulaanbaatar, and I think it was back in the UK, and it was about a month afterwards before I realized I'd lost it. And then I just didn't think anything of it. I travel all around the world. I was like, oh, these things happen. I think it only cost like $50 from the internet. But it was great. It was just really robust and usable, and I had it for about 3 years. So I didn't think anything more of it until I came out here again about the following year, sort of 9 months later, with a group. And we were sitting in the garden. When you can just tell something's up with a family, and they were sort of looking at each other. I was like, oh, what's going on? This is a bit weird. And then they had the solar charger, which I must have left with them by accident. And they'd been using it for all that time, and it was such a precious commodity for them, but they just felt compelled to give it back to me. And I found that so touching, because to me, like, what's $50? For them, this piece of kit had actually changed their lives, that they could charge it, and they tried to give it back, and of course I refused. But they're such honest, open, decent people, and I really mean that with the Mongolians. They living in nature and living with so close to animals with a sense of community. They have such an honest, open spirit, and I just really love spending time with them. This was some of the tourists we were with there, just taking some funny photos. That's a shot from a different group in the same place. This is sort of the last Great Lake at the end of the trip that you come and see. Feels a little bit like the Norwegian fjords when you're there. So just before I finish, I just want to tell you a little bit more about some other places in Mongolia, away from the horse riding. Somewhere we go in September is over to the Altai mountain range, which is on the far west of the country. And there's a famous eagle hunting festival in October, but we go to a smaller private one in September because the October one got a little bit touristy. And because, China and Russia actually separate now Mongolia from Kazakhstan, but still a lot of the people here have Kazakh origins, so it's sort of a tribe of Mongolian Kazakhs. And I just wanted to show you some pictures of this different region. These are the Altai. I mean, it's absolutely stunning. And so this is just some shots of the Mongol Kazakh Eagle Hunting Festival. Oh, this is the famous Kiss the Girls that they do. That's also a game that's played at the traditional Nadam festival. The man has to obviously chase after a woman and try and kiss her. But if you're a keen photographer, you can get some absolutely amazing shots of the local people who still dress, that's a wolf fur hat she's wearing, in their traditional clothing. I mean, it looks super, super cool. One thing I haven't done yet, but I'm planning a recce trip this November, is to go up to the Taiga, which is in the very, very north of the country. I don't have much information about it, but I just know that the people there ride reindeer. I don't know if you've heard of this before or seen anything like it, but it looks absolutely wonderful. They live in teepees rather than gers. Don't ask me why. But as you can see, they actually ride reindeer. And I think, this is a very, very remote place up near the Russian border. And it's a part of Mongolia I've never been to. But as I said, I'm going there this year to open up a trip and make contact with this tribe. Just because it looks like absolutely crazy and wicked. I've never seen anything like it. We'll do a bit of a Q&A in a little bit. Before we do, I just want to show you a quick video, which I don't feel like I've actually done justice to Mongolia and the variety of the people and the culture, but hopefully this can fill in a few of the gaps I may have left. Just one thing from that video I forgot to mention. Did you see the gentleman who was sort of doing the eagle movement with the sort of tiny little diddy waistcoats? They're Mongolian wrestlers, which is apart from horse riding, is one of the most popular national sports in Mongolia. I lived in Japan for a year when I was younger, and I remember at the time the Yokozuna, which is like the best sumo wrestler in Japan. He was Mongolian for like 10 years, which was a great travesty to the Japanese people. But yeah, I mean, these guys, they are big and untouchable. And just a quick anecdote, the reason they wear such a funny little waistcoat to wrestle in, they never used to. They used to, back in the day, just wrestle in their deals. But then there was one lady, and a similar thing almost to what happened in Japan. There was one woman who was undefeated in all of Mongolia as a wrestler, and the men were so embarrassed that no one could beat this woman at wrestling that they changed the outfit so that women would never wear it because their breasts would then be hanging out. So I think that's really unfair. Well, thank you for your time. I hope I've at least just encouraged you to go and visit Mongolia. It's a wonderful country. Does anyone have any questions? Yes. Oh, I don't know off the top of my head. Google would know, obviously. I would say that people are much healthier than I expected. You know, because their diet's so limited to milk and meat. You know, there are. Say again, sorry. It doesn't sound like a healthy diet at all. But people are very healthy, and they do have a few, greens and vegetables imported now. But most of the people who live out, away from Ulaanbaatar, they're not going to be getting imported goods. My only assumption is that because the meat is so fresh and so natural, their flocks are just grazing all day long in grass. They're getting the vitamins somehow, because Mongolians are very healthy people. They have very active, but I think also their diet, it's definitely sustaining them. And they have excellent teeth, obviously, from a lack of sugar in their diet and lots of calcium. And they're just healthy, and like you said, they're outdoors all the time. So I don't know the life expectancy off the top of my head, though. When we travel, do we take our own food? We take some of our own food, yes, but no, only for our cooks. But if we've got smaller groups, or when I was going by myself, for example, absolutely, we'd go and stay with the local people, and they'd cook us noodles with meat, and we'd have yogurt for breakfast. The food's really delicious. Although simple, it's really nourishing and great. And when you've been out and sitting on a horse all day, I mean, anything can taste good after that. You've worked up a really good appetite. I think up in the north at Kuvaskull Lake, where there's, large bodies of water, yeah, absolutely. But I mean, where we are here, I didn't see them eating a lot of fish around the lake. I don't think there is a huge amount. No, the Nadam Festival, it's in June. Yeah. If I remember correctly. It happens all over the country, but the main one happens in Ulaanbaatar, the capital. And that also dates back to the time of Chinggis Khan. I think it translates to Games of Men, and it's wrestling, horse racing, and archery. So it was very much from the original Mongols, test of manhood, test of strength, warrior, competitiveness, and it's just lasted until this day. Yeah, it's a really good time. It could be it's pretty warm, but it's a good time, obviously, to go and see the festival. What I would recommend is to the one in Ulaanbaatar, obviously you're seeing it in the middle of a city, and Ulaanbaatar, although it has some interesting parts, it does have a power station also right in the middle of it, so the pollution's quite bad, especially in the winter. But of course, they celebrate Nadam all over the country in smaller villages, and so get out to one of those. It might not be quite as glamorous. I mean, the main one's held in a football stadium, but get out, and then I think it'll be a more sort of genuine interaction with the culture and with the people there. Sure, yeah. So the question was, is the riding, do you use a loose rein? You can't look at the Mongolians and try and copy them, because they just make it look so easy. They do have a loose rein, but they've probably known that horse for 15 years. So it's a living animal. I wouldn't use neither a loose nor a super tight rein. Just have a general connection. The horse knows you're there, but you can't be yanking it all the time. Or, of course, in horse language, a really loose rein means let's go. So just somewhere in the happy medium, unless, of course, you do want to go and then let it loose, give them a little chew, and then you're off very, very quickly. Are the horses shod? No, they're not. No, they leave them unshod because they're not riding them on roads. Yeah, and so it's most of the time they're walking on grass, but then they're just as happy scrambling up a slag heap of a mountain as well. So the question is, can we only join the trip from Ulaanbaatar? We are a ground handler, so we don't organize flights. We can either meet you at Ulaanbaatar, or we can the norm rather than the exception is that clients will do a group tour with us, but then do a few other little bit of add-ons in a country on a bespoke basis. We can organize that. So if you came in on the Trans-Siberian, we could meet you anywhere in the country. We could arrange for that transportation for you to then come and join the group afterwards if you'd like. So the question was, how long do you recommend to go out for? So that group tour that we do there is 9 days, include flying in and flying out of Ulaanbaatar. But I mean, there's plenty to see. You know, we're just in one IMAG, which means province, over from Ulaanbaatar in the Nijmegen region to the west. But it's a big country. You know, as long as you've got, you know, you can go down and explore the Gobi Desert. You can go up to the north to the forests. You know, as much time as you have. We just tend to try and keep this trip short because it just means it's more accessible to a larger number of people. The question is, do we go to the Gobi Desert as part of the trip? You saw myself on the Bactrian camel. So on the way back from the Nijmegen National Park, we stop off on the very northern tip of the desert and do a camel ride for a day. And there's a ger camp that we stay at there. So we just do 1 day in the desert to experience that, and then we head back to Ulaanbaatar. And that reminds me, sorry, one thing I forgot to mention was the night sky. And the desert is one of the most amazing places to see it because there's no air pollution. And you can see the Milky Way like you see it on space and science TV documentaries. You just have all of the stars. And that is a wonderful thing to see night after night. It, again, like, takes you out of your ridiculous worries of modern life and gives you a sense of perspective of just where you are in the world and how vast it is. That's another great thing I love about the destinations we go to, because you're out of civilization and every night you just have the greatest show on earth. So you'd wake up in the yurt, obviously, in the ger, sorry. You would then go to breakfast, which we'd have, and then, you know, just pack your bags, and the Mongolian horsemen pack up the horses. You're not expected to load up and saddle the horses. We will then get in the horses, ride for a bit, stop for lunch. We may be going to visit local gers on the way, chat to people. We might get off. There's at one point where we actually ride up to a high hill to go and see a small monastery and an ovu, which is a holy bank of stones with the prayer flags around it to have a beautiful view of the surrounding area. And then when we get into the ger camp that we're staying that night, again, it's just a case of hand the horses back over to the horsemen. They simply have 2 stakes in the ground with string along it. They will tie the reins up for the horses. We go in and sort of, you've got free time to meet the local people or go and do some photography or just have a rest or whatever you fancy. They will then unsaddle the horses, unsaddle everyone's luggage, take it to the different gers, which are all heated by a wood-burning stove. In the old days, they would just have a fire in the middle, which is obviously quite bad because it makes them smoky. Now everyone has a tin chimney which goes out the top, so they're not smoky at all. Extremely warm and beautiful to sleep by because they have Western-style beds with thick blankets, and with the fire going, it lights up the ger at night. You can see just like 1 or 2 stars twinkling through the gap where the chimney goes out, and it feels like you're sleeping under a big Japanese lantern. And then obviously when everyone's got their stuff and had a nap, we then just convene for dinner. And one of the most delicious things that they threaten us with is cooked marmots, which I wouldn't recommend eating because that's where the Black Plague originated from. So, but the locals still insist on hunting them and eating them. And occasionally, you know, a few people do break out with bubonic plague still to this day in Mongolia. Fortunately, now it's easily treated. So either, depending on the size of the group, our cooks will cook the evening meal and we'll have it with the local family. And then we normally just get, you know, quite an early night. You have a light in the ger from the solar panels, and then, you know, sleep well because of all the exercise you've done that day, wake up and do it all over again. Pretty, yeah, basic. I mean, shower, they don't have showers. The local people don't. They will just wash, you know, down by a river or a lake. With us, we're only out riding for about 5 days, so it's kind of we can get a bowl of hot water and sort of do a wash like that. And then toilet-wise, they'll just have like a very simple, what do you call it, outhouse? Yeah, one of those. But nice and far away from where everyone's gears are pitched, obviously, for hygiene reasons. So yeah, it's pretty rough and ready, but it's Mongolia. Thank you. Excellent. Well, look, thank you for your patience. Thank you for your time. Cheers.